The really weird thing about this place is it's right across the road from a big police station, which, if I believe, was also where the National Drug Squad was as well. So a lot of irony in the location of this club. But and if I'm hazy on some of the details, I mean, that's to be expected because it was a time to be, kind of getting messed up. So your memories, if they're hazy, it meant you had a really good time.
I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, a podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories they created there, and the people that they used to know. Now, I know that I've been using the term icon to describe a lot of my guests lately, but if ever there was an appropriate time to use the word, it is now. Declan Buckley's drag character, Shirley Temple Bar, burst onto the scene when she won Alternative Miss Ireland in 1997. Since then, she has hosted Bingo weekly for the last 23 years at the George in Dublin and hosts the national lottery game show Telly Bingo. None of this compares, however, to the fact that she has met the Spice Girls, like all 5 of the Spice Girls. We caught up to discuss H.A.M at P.O.D and the heady days of 90s Dublin.
So my basic gig is that when I finished university back in, the year broke out there. When I finished university, the first thing that I did, because Ireland back then was a completely different place, I legged it. I packed my shit and I moved to London straight away. So I lived in London for like several years after I graduated. And when I moved back to Ireland after being in the UK for maybe 5 or 6 years, I moved back to a completely different space. It was completely changed. I was completely changed as well because, living in London and being a gay person, you kind of, you live your life. You see shit that you haven't seen before,
You relax a little into yourself.
Yeah. So when I moved to London, it was in 1992. And I, with a lot of my flatmates, who half of whom were Irish as well, we were young gay people. We were, we were wide-eyed and wild and having the best time. We're going to, clubs around, that we were in West London at that time. So our local was a place called the Royal Oak, which is in Hammersmith. Mm-hmm. It's no longer there, but at the time, Jeremy Joseph, who's the kind of head honcho of GAY, mm-hmm. He was running that place then, and he was just about to move to take over Bang, and the GAY franchise was yet to come. And so when I was living there was when that kind of all kicked off. I had a great time, lived my wildest kind of mad times, being a slut, the whole thing, and then decided I'd had enough. I kind of decided I want to come back to Ireland.
Wait. Did you have enough of London, or you had enough of being a slut?
Well, obviously, you can never have enough of being a slut.
Oh, okay. Phew. Good.
I have to be very careful of what I say here. But so then it was, to be honest with you, London is such a big city and I'm from a small town and I wanted to be near people, and I found having to travel for an hour to go to work on the tube and then have an hour to come back home, and then I was going out a lot. I was even going out a lot during the week, so I'd go out and then with another hour on the tube. And you just found yourself traveling a lot and being on my own a lot because my friends were in different parts of the city, and some of them were hooking up and they were in relationships, and I hadn't been in a long-term relationship at that stage, so I kind of got a bit pissed off with the whole thing and going out clubbing all the time. I was in GAY and Heaven and all these places having a great old time, but and then
oh, it was so hard. I was just having such a good time.
But it was also tiring. It's tiring as fuck being fabulous all the time. So, and I wanted to come home and have fun. So I moved home in the mid '90s, and as I said already, I came back to a Dublin that had changed. People had done what I'd done. They'd gone away and come home, and the LGBT scene in Dublin seemed more vibrant, and I was ready to be part of it as well. So I found myself, hanging out, with really good bunch of friends, and every Friday, and this is the place that I really want to start talking about, is we go to in a club complex called P.O.D, which stands for Place of Dance, because that's really radical. Yeah.
Oh, that's
P.O.D.
great.
And it was in the kind of, it was a reconfiguration of the old Harcourt Street train station in Dublin, and so part of the building was kind of old and fabulous, and part of it was very warehousey, and it was some of the club was inside the archways of the old train platform. Actually, if you remember Boyzone's very first video in the 1990s, which you probably might not because you sound much younger than me, if you've seen Boyzone's very first video, it was filmed in the P.O.D, the Place of Dance, and in the archways there, and it's just them pouncing around, and in the 90s it was all very kind of long silk shirts with long sleeves, and very kind of Lauren Llewellyn Bone kind of crazy, flouncy linen, horrible clothing, and greasy hair, and they're all there with candles, big wrought iron candles, but it's all taking place inside the archways of this club. And when it opened, the club was the place to be. It was, queues outside with Club 54 type bouncers, and you kind of get, you'd be kind of delighted with yourself if you got in, that kind of thing. Luckily for me, my friends were running the club, so I was already feeling very comfortable there. And I suppose one of the best things about the club for me, this is the Friday night gay night run by, actually, Panty Bliss was the main promoter with
Okay.
her friends, and Niall Sweeney and a whole bunch of other people, and the DJs were fab, and the music, it was very cool, it was very edgy and fun and sweaty, and the gay boys were hot, and it was a cool place to be. But it was also, as well as being somewhere you wanted to be, it was also somewhere I felt comfortable, because often you can be very comfortable in a scraggy old local gay bar because you know it really well, but it doesn't give you the same kind of Studio 54 vibe where you kind of I got in here on my own merits because I'm fab, that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
It was one place, it was probably the first place in my youth where I kind of went, not only do I feel I belong here, I also feel I want to be here. And that was really fun. It was a really fun time. We had so many kind of crazy nights there. It was the 90s, so you can imagine why. But it was, nights that never ended, and we'd end up going off afterwards. And before we knew it, Friday was out again. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, so I think we haven't actually talked about what the name of the night is. We know that P.O.D stands for Place of Dance, but H.A.M stands for...
Well, you see, allegedly, and I suppose it does because they said it does, it stands for Homo Action Movies. I never really understood why, because...
Does that mean porn?
Kind of, because there was sometimes a bit of porn playing, but it was... Rory and the guys were very aesthetically kind of fashion forward, and kind of, Niall Sweeney did amazing graphics, and the graphics always had a sort of it was more the pork and the pig kind of, aspect of ham. Whereas,
okay.
Yeah, so that was the kind of, it was, I kind of always thought that was the innuendo was to do with, sausage and pork and all that kind of stuff. To be honest with you, I never really gave it that much thought, because you didn't, but there was kind of butcher kind of vibe off them as well sometimes.
Well, that sexy butcher vibe, yeah.
He's figured in the thing as well. But also, now that you mentioned the porn, there was this really, really weird movie that they like to show on the big screen, kind of, which seemed to be made out of sheets. They were really good at taking the space and making it seem like it wasn't the same space that you were in if you were there for another night. It just felt like a different space, and those guys were amazing at making it feel like a really fun environment to be in. But they have this really strange Turkish sport, which I don't know what it is, but it's kind of like Turkish wrestling
with oil.
Yes. Do you know the one I'm
Yes.
talking about? And so but the men are wearing kind of leather trousers, but no top, and oiled. And the whole idea seems to be to like kind of trying to hold the guy down as long as possible and sit on top of him, but the other guy is oiled up and he's kind of wriggling to get his,
Yeah.
I did spend many hours looking, kind of trying to work out what the fuck was going on because, no. Then again,
But it's
people,
easy to get distracted when that's happening, isn't it?
but also, if you're, trying ecstasy for the third time, everything can seem interesting, It was the 90s. So yeah, so there was that going on. There was kind of like really fun music.
But wait. So that was happening live?
No,
Okay.
yeah, it was a projection, but it was
I'm suddenly less interested.
yeah, kind of like was happening live in many ways. The dance floor was full of sweaty people who were like definitely on something and definitely having the time of their lives, and what I'm talking about. It was very electric.
Yes. Yeah.
Clubbing in the 90s was a certain thing. It was a certain thing that hasn't been replicated for me. But then again, I'm an old person, so maybe it's still there.
Well, let's kind of explore that a bit more. What do you think is different?
Well, for me, my main motivation in being in a LGBT space at the moment would be when I'm performing as my drag character, Shirley Temple Bar. So I'd be putting on a show, I'd be backstage, I'd be doing my bit, and then I'd meet people afterwards when they're dancing. To be honest with you, I'm not much for getting up on the dance floor anymore. And it's particularly in the nights when I'm there because the music mightn't be to my taste or whatever. So, so I don't know if it's changed in that way, but I think definitely it's become a lot more fragmented. I mentioned coming back to Dublin from the UK, from London specifically, where London is this big sprawling place, to a city where there was less places to go, and you kind of knew most of the people who were your age who were out. So it was, that was a really fun experience, and I suppose obviously, naturally, I'm older now. I'm also married now. I'm kind of not looking for the same thing that the young kids are looking for. So, of course, I'm not going to be having the same experiences as them. So, it would be kind of a bit curmudgeonly for me to start saying, sure, back in my day, things were much better, because I think everybody makes you make your own thing with whatever you got. And you try to, the onus is on each generation to kind of pull out the bits to make whatever they're doing the fun thing for them, to get themselves through that particular stage.
So it's maybe more that you've changed over time rather than...
I fucking hope so. Yeah. I mean, I've been doing my gig in the George for like 23 years. We're talking about a club I used to go to, which is like 30 years ago, roughly. So, you do the maths. I'm not a child. So obviously one would hope that my perspective in my needs from life have changed a little bit.
Okay, but just so we're clear, you still enjoy watching the Turkish wrestling, right?
I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah. Okay. Phew. Good.
The sport. I mean, I think it even has a name, and I really wish I could remember.
I think it has a name. It must have a name.
No,
but yeah.
The fucking sport.
Yeah. I mean, I get a bit lost when sports comes in. But so let's just get this timeline right. So you were in London for 5 years, from 92 to 97, or?
And from 91, 92 till 96. Yeah.
96. Okay. And then, so in that time, homosexuality was legalized within Ireland.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely a different world.
I was out in Ireland what a lot of people don't talk about when they talk about legalization, which happened, the actual bill was enacted in 93. It doesn't mean that like in 92 and 91 and in the late 80s that, everybody was being chased by the cops. And it wasn't that kind of thing. It was because David Norris had taken a case to the European Court of Human Rights as early as the 1970s. There was legal stuff happening, and in that time, even though there was a law on the statute books that said this is illegal, people weren't being they weren't being arrested, and it wasn't
criminalized.
Yeah. So while you were nominally a criminal, you were in effect kind of allowed to go to your very quiet, boarded up, blackened window gay bar and hang out. And so I was a bit kind of frightened and horrified and put off by 1980s Dublin. And of course, that was the kind of the heyday of the AIDS crisis, and it was very heavy. So
Did
then,
you-
so go ahead.
Oh no! I mean, you just brought up the AIDS crisis, and all I wanted to ask was, did you have to ring a bell to get into the bar? I think maybe
It wasn't quite that, but there was definitely you kind of look over your shoulder, and then you look over your shoulder again, and then you'd kind of skedaddle down the narrow alleyway and kind of scoot in. That wasn't because it was more that you just didn't want people to kind of follow you. There was definitely a time for that, but that was possibly also my own stuff.
Yeah, but and okay, so it wasn't as bad as it sounds, but it was still a more oppressive society.
I mean, people were being beaten up, and there was a lot of homophobia in on display. I've mentioned AIDS, and I've mentioned the fact that there was definitely a tension around that. So anybody who was gay felt targeted by people's general shit attitudes about that. Ireland was kind of coming out of a kind of a Roman Catholic stupor, where the society seemed to think it was one thing, when in fact it was realizing that it didn't want to be that. And that was a long road. I keep saying this, but it was a long road to get from the late 1980s through to 2015, when we had the marriage equality referendum that was very heavily endorsed. It was a long road, and there was many stages along that road. But for most people, I think the individual road, realizing that even though there are arseholes out there that have stupid attitudes towards you, you make your own path, and there's more people who think like you than don't. So that was a good journey to find yourself on.
Really heartening. So just picking up on the point about the heavy religious focus in Ireland at the time, was there then kind of as happened with the marriage referendum, was there then this concentrated effort to spread homophobia in order to somehow scupper that progress in society, or was there focus elsewhere at the time?
There's always the Americans call it a culture war. There's definitely a group of people who believe they know what's best for everybody else, and there would be their opposites, people who believe that they want to do their thing, and their thing isn't going to hurt anybody, so therefore just let me do my thing. In the middle, there are people who just don't give a shit about either of the arguments, and sometimes their silence can be just as hurtful as them joining up with one of the other sides. Now, I'm obviously not on the side of the homophobe. The homophobes would be coming from era of a lot of power, which gradually began to disintegrate as their hypocrisy was unveiled, as paedophilia in the priesthood was being kind of constantly and forever reported, and so many people who would have been part of the silent majority actually acknowledged that, well, hang on a second, this organization and this thought process, and it's not just about the church, it's about the control that the ideology had on the way the whole of the country was run. And that included allowing people to have, to be gay, to have nightclubs that were for gay people. Mm-hmm. And I'm remembering, the 90s, when I just around the time that I had come back from London. Again, I'm going to, this is actually Panty's story herself, but she probably tells it way better than I will. But she'd run a club called GAG, which is another one of her 3-letter acronyms. I don't even remember what GAG stood for, but definitely, way more kind of edgy than the H.A.M thing, and it was definitely much more of a kind of a sex, orgy kind of club. It was definitely down that line of vibe. And I remember that she made the front page of some kind of red top tabloid newspaper because people were, in inverted commas, clutched their pearls, horrified by the gays, having this kind of sex club, and it was, I don't know if that attention would be given nowadays to something like that happen. People might think it was a bit, okay, that's a bit much, but I don't think it would have the same level of kind of shock horror, mock horror, because it was definitely performative kind of morality that wasn't justified because the same people who were like, shouting at the queers for having their gay club, where men might be kissing each other, were also going to mass the next day with the priest who was doing way worse.
Yeah, and turning a blind eye.
Yeah, and then being horrified when they were being criticized, and I think so that kind of hypocrisy unraveled the whole thing. And I think so by the time it got to this century, people were like, okay, we're kind of done with this. We're hearing. So not only were these stories being revealed about what these priests were doing to young people and to children, it was also revealed how the church, the establishment of the church, going all the way up, were also complicit in hiding it, and then for their own political gain, for their own power, but to be able to control things, they didn't want the story revealed. So when all that stuff came out, people just lost. They lost it. They just went, you know what? This is not a voice for good. They're not the moral guardians of our republic. We're not having this. I'm not having this. So so I think from that point on, I think people began to listen to facts, and and also there were people who were out there living their best gay lives, who were showing people that what they were doing wasn't harming people. It was actually, dare I say, a lot of fun, including stuff that we were doing. Panty was doing her stuff. I was doing my show. My show was becoming well known, and people were coming from all walks of life to come in to see the show and going, actually, this is fucking good fun. Much in the same way that you could to 2020, and every 14-year-old girl in the world watches RuPaul's Drag Race, and whereas that would have been horrifying, 20 years ago. Your daughter's doing what? So even that shift seems kind of ridiculous when you look at it. It's actually not that much of a shift, but when you're back then, it would have seemed like this amazing sea change of thought.
Okay, so just so we finish off this timeline. So you came back, came back in 96, but then 97, like pretty big year for you, right?
Yeah. So, and this is again to do with the way that my life was at that time. I was hanging out. I'd come back from London where I'd had real jobs. I'd kind of quit my real jobs. I was working in a coffee shop, going to Rory's clubs in the P.O.D, having the best old time, and in the Red Box, which is actually part of the P.O.D building. It actually was built in 1996, a big, huge, bigger club for like dance music events, and I had a big stage. So Rory and the crew decided to host their alternative Miss Ireland there, which happened in March 1997, in the version we're talking about, because that was the year that I entered it with Shirley Temple Bar, and I won, babies. I won. Yeah. So
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Yeah. Spoil me life alert.
But so how long had you been, Shirley, at that point?
About an hour. I mean, no, literally, that was the first time. That was the first time I'd done. And
it's just all been downhill since then.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, this now, Panty Rory had basically said to me, "Will you do this thing where we want a contestant come and do it?" And I'm kind of, okay, sounds like it sounds like fun. Basically, she was saying, "You're mad, you'll do this," and I'm going, "I'm mad, I will do this." So I didn't really know what I was getting into, to be honest with you, and I certainly didn't realize that it would be a kind of a life-changing thing because I won. I ended up getting other gigs, and I ended up becoming, a kind of working queen, which was never my intention. Cut to 23 years later, and I'm still a working queen.
So winning the crown for Alternative Miss Ireland, did that lead to your gig at the George then? Absolutely,
yeah. I mean, as I said, so on the night, I didn't know what I was getting into. I did a really stupid thing. It's so weird, and I don't even think it translates, and I don't even think if I was to do it again exactly the same in 2020, I think people would just look and go, you're a weirdo. But on the night, it seemed to fly, and it worked, and everybody, all the judges except for Louis Walsh, thought I was fun. Louis took great pains.
Bloody Louis Walsh.
I took great pains, because this is the kind of guy he is, took great pains to tell me on several occasions whenever I met him in Ireland throughout the years that he didn't think I should have won that night.
Just apropos of nothing, I just wanted to tell you.
His inability to get a judging panel to do what he wanted, or that he just didn't like me, or he was impressed that even though whatever he wanted, I managed to thwart and subvert. In whatever minor way I managed to do that, by the way. Anyway, whatever, I'm just kidding. But
so what was your actual act?
Oh my God. So again, it was a kind of a nod to the fact that it was the middle of the 90s and everybody seemed to be on drugs. Everybody was doing drugs. Ecstasy was everywhere, and clubbers were kind of crazy. So, but there was also, in the city of Dublin, there was a kind of problem with heroin as well. So I made my heroine of my story kind of very much anti-drugs, and she was like a schoolgirl who had turned her back on drugs and decided to take up gymnastics instead. So, but anybody who saw her perform her gymnastics would be under no illusion that that bitch is still on drugs. So that was kind of the vibe. Again, it doesn't make any sense. It's so stupid. Essentially, I was a schoolgirl character, and I was from Dublin, so it was very much a kind of a parochial thing. And the name Shirley Temple Bar is a play on obviously Shirley Temple, the kind of child star, and Temple Bar, which is a part of Dublin city centre. So
it's overrun with horrible tourists. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, like me. So it was kind of, as I said, it wasn't something that I spent a lot of time thinking about, because I didn't think it would turn out to be anything other than, another crazy night that I'd forgotten the details of, but I had a good time. In the end, it turned out to be something that, within a week I was offered a gig and I was being paid, and then I got another gig and I was being paid, and I'm, okay, this seems like fun. And before I knew it, I had a regular weekly gig doing bingo in the George, and that's how that happened, and that was 23 years ago,
and it's still going. It's incredible.
Crazy.
But so in terms of so being a title holder for Alternative Miss Ireland, like what does that do in terms of your status? So like when you were in H.A.M. at P.O.D, would everyone know who you were?
Well, kind of, because at the time, the AMI, the Alternative, wasn't really like, it was a once a year thing, and it had only been kind of done the year before once. I mean, there was one time in the 80s when they had done it, but this particular incarnation of it had only, so it was the second year of the kind of renaissance of it. So it didn't really come with a lot of baggage. So a lot of the kind of, it was whatever I did turned out to be what AMI people did. And after me came a whole slew of very talented, fun people who did incredible things as well. So as the years went by, it became, the AMI title came with the kind of, this can happen, and you can do this, and you can end up working on television and blah blah blah. But at the time, it wasn't that big a deal, other than people seemed to think I was a nut job and they liked what I was doing, and it was fun. I was having a good time, and every day was a different day, and I didn't know what. I didn't have a plan, didn't have an agenda. I liked having fun and going out and working, getting paid to have a good time seemed like a win-win situation for me. Still does.
Yeah. So in the club, would people know you, or would you be able to be anonymous?
I think in the initial stages, yes, you would be anonymous. But again, remember, this is not London or a big city where, there's lots of different clubs. You'd have regular people coming there, and so for the large part, the regular crew would know who most other people were. So you were that guy who did whatever that thing that you do is, and whether that's you wear the same sailor suit every week, or you're the guy who does loads of drugs and ends up in a pool of your own vomit in the corner, or you're the guy.
There was only one of them.
Yeah, well, one that did it especially well. You got to keep working to get the title. Yeah. So yeah, and Dublin's a small place. So, and of course there were a lot of tourists, and I don't mean people from out of town. I mean temporary visitors to the LGBT world who would come in and do whatever they needed to do and then leave again back to wherever they worked as a priest. So, it was a weird time. It was fun and crazy and weird, and we had lots of fun.
But does that bring with it any sort of feeling of responsibility or any regulation of your own behavior because people know who you are and maybe judging you?
I would say, well, there's always haters going to hate, and there's always going to be people who are going to disapprove of whatever you do. And again, you're going back to a time when representations of you're not representing the gays very well would be an admonishment that a lot of drag queens would get. You're presenting the wrong thing entirely, whatever. The gays that work in offices will be...
Oh, yeah, I'm a normal person, you're not.
And you're giving us a bad name with your decadence and your, why do you have to talk about sex so much? Why is sexuality so important when you're talking about homosexual? It's in the fucking word, you moron. That's what it is. But, and kind of, of course, there would be people who think that you're a dickhead, but whatever, if you're not able to deal with that, you're not going to be able to deal with life. But in terms of the responsibilities, I think as my career kind of became a bigger thing, and then I was working on television, and particularly when I started doing the game show program, which I started presenting as a drag queen on Irish television in about 2001 maybe. And when I was doing that, because I was representing, a TV show, and you'd kind of feel you had to be a bit more careful about the way you presented yourself when you're doing your other stuff. Because one of the pleasures about being a drag queen in the 90s was you could do or say whatever you want because you're part of the underbelly. Your underworld is kind of mocked and thought of as being disgraceful anyway. So being disgraceful and dishonorable was kind of part of the gig, whereas suddenly you're on national television, you're becoming part of this media establishment. You kind of feel that you have to be a little more careful. But I think at the end of the day, I'd also got to a point in my life where I wasn't a single person anymore. I'd met who's now my husband, Andrew. We met in H.A.M. back in 2000. So and we were together like 20 years this year. But we met each other. So you're in a couple. Your behavior, your lifestyle is different. You're not going to get into the kind of sloppy messes that you get into when you're a single person.
And no more like felching jokes or anything.
Well, you can make the jokes.
Oh, okay. So let's then talk about your husband. And so you met at H.A.M. Do you remember that night?
Yeah, well, we always joke. So H.A.M. So H.A.M. Nobody called it H.A.M.
Okay, sorry, H.A.M.
Yeah, you can call it what you like, but H.A.M. every Friday, and after a few years of H.A.M. being every Friday, Panty Rory decided that they would put on a cabaret show early in the evening at around 8 or 9 to kind of get people in early. And so that we would have a drag show, which I used to do at Shirley Temple Bar. And then we do the show for a couple of hours and then we'd get changed and then we'd go out, we'd have a great night, we'd have a laugh. And the club would be rammed and it was always great fun. And you'd see everybody there. I met the Spice Girls there one night. Really fun.
All 5 of them?
Actually, all 5 of them were there, but we ended up literally hanging out with Baby Spice and Jerry Halliwell for the evening because they were the fun, crazy ones.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, epic. That was when they came over to do. I think they were either doing an awards show or like a big kind of charity gig in the O2 or whatever it was called back then, the theater that did all the big gigs. Mm-hmm. And then they came to the club afterwards because it was the kind of fun place to be. The way they do. Where the gays hang out. And they found us, and we of course we were doing our show, so we were all back in the kind of the VIP area, kind of chilling and pretending that we're fabulous, and that's where they were brought. So next thing you know, we were standing beside the Spice Girls.
Wow.
Lots of amazing, so much fun.
Anyway,
And
sorry, I'm getting distracted. Let's get back to your husband, then meeting him. So the show was on.
Yeah, no. What I was about to say was, so we would do our show, and then we would come down and hang out with the crowd afterwards. And so my joke is that I'd see him for a few weeks before we actually met, and the joke is that he was stalking me. And of course, he seems to think that I was a bit of a predator. So 20 years later, we're still arguing about who exactly was the most who was responsible.
Oh, okay. So do you remember your first conversation at all?
Um, we didn't talk.
Oh,
It was
I
non-verbal.
see.
Yeah.
That's
But,
well, I mean, that's the best way to communicate, really, isn't it?
you've got to work out whether this is going to work for you on a mind to body kind of level.
Yeah, like why bother with chit chat, right? Like,
No, and it's
like
words don't count.
yeah, if you spend all this time getting to know someone and then when you snog, it's terrible. It's like,
Yeah,
well, I've just wasted an hour.
exactly. Homosexuality. It's in the fucking word. So yeah.
Ah,
So so we met. We had a really fun time, and and then 20 years later.
really fun time. Should I won't ask any follow-up questions there.
Can't hear you. I think you can hear me. So I'm talking about him. So there'll be.
Oh, okay. So then I can. So if you could just say yes or no.
Oh God, yeah. No, I get in trouble.
Okay.
I'm a very private person, so not really.
Well, that's another thing that drag queens are famous for, right?
Well, being private.
Yeah.
Although there is that thing of like, you've got one side of you that you throw out there to be devoured, so you can kind of keep the bits that you want to for yourself. And but the thing about it is that for drag queens, the mask can sometimes be a thing that you can hide behind, but it's also a thing that when you take it off, people kind of think is either weird or interesting, maybe, or maybe not interesting at all. It's like RuPaul does that a lot as well. I'm amused by how RuPaul seems to want to spend less and less time in drag because makeup it's a drag.
And is there also like a weird feeling of erasure of yourself? Oh, I don't know. I'm saying this right.
I do think that's part of it as well, because I suppose it's if you achieve success and you achieve attention in a creation that's not you, it's not even you in name, and it doesn't look like you, and sometimes people don't even recognize you 20 minutes later when you've taken it off. You can feel that the success doesn't even, or the attention doesn't belong to you, so you don't even get that part of it. So all you really get is any financial return or sort of nominal kind of, the knowledge in your head. It's kind of an intellectual thing. So a lot of people, yes, it's part of that. It's like, I want to be known for me. I'm me.
But there's also like, do you ever have people who meet you in non-drag who are kind of disappointed?
Of course. Everybody should be. Yeah, well,
that's so fucking entitled and rude, isn't it? Like, it's just such a weird thing.
So is, meeting people after a show has been the bane of my life for a long time. In fact, so much so that I avoid it where possible, because it's the thing, people are disappointed. Even if they meet you in drag afterwards, they're disappointed because you're just either not able to deliver,
You're not at 100 all the time. Yeah.
Well, and especially if I've just done a 3-hour show, I'm sorry, fucking bitch. I don't want to give you any more. I've given it to you before. I'm out here having a drink now, or I'm chatting to my friends, or whatever it is. But there's also the fact where you can't possibly give people the attention that they want. They want to tell you their life story. They want to tell you every single dark, depraved thing. People seem to think that drag queens are like confessionals for every dark deed that they've ever done in their life. And, that's lovely and all, but I think sometimes I just want to sit here and have a drink with my friends. That's why we have a VIP section. That's why we pull the rope, the curtain back, so I can go back to my conversation with Jerry Halliwell.
Oh, what was she wearing?
It was the mid-90s. She was wearing something hideous. It wasn't a Union Jack dress, but it was definitely something gaudy.
And her tits were out, no
Yeah,
doubt.
very
Yeah.
much so. Yeah, very much.
Oh,
I know. I
Jerry.
miss that Jerry. I miss her.
So I did a little bit of research, so you know it, which is like one Google search and then like looking at three articles.
It is, it's true.
So the only thing that came up was some old rough guidebook about Dublin that talked about H.A.M at P.O.D, and it talked about the Art Deco room. Does this ring any bells for you?
Art Deco room. Yeah. Like so. The actual space was, as I said earlier on, it's in the underbelly of an old train station, and literally these are Victorian train station archways, and there were three or maybe four of them in a row. One of them was the main dance area that had been knocked through to the next one, which was a small VIP lounge, which is where you would go if you were meeting with a Spice Girl, for example. And the other one would have been used for a bathroom or something like that. And then on the other side, there was like a fancy bar it was a lot of wrought iron and very fancy sculpture, but I don't remember anything that was very Art Deco. It was very it was very stone and very I don't know about Art Deco. Maybe I was just out of it on ecstasy. Maybe I didn't see anything. But yeah.
Or maybe this rough guy just full of shit.
Yeah, more than likely. It was a really nice space, though. I mean, it was definitely a very cool and interesting space to be in, and they developed it. It was obviously successful, so they bought a space above the archways, which they turned into a big, massive club as well called the Red Box. The whole place was converted in years to come to be called Tripod, with the old kind of the bar area was turned into a performing lounge called Crawdaddy. So all these people were rebranded. Unfortunately, I think around the time of the last recession, the whole thing just came to a financial crunch and ended up being vacated. It was empty for a long time. And I think at the moment, it's currently being redeveloped into some kind of retail space, which is very sad.
But not flats, which is usually what.
No, it's not really in a kind of a residentially type area. But yeah, and the really weird thing about this place is it's right across the road from a big police station, which, if I believe, was also where the National Drug Squad was as well. So a lot of irony, in the location of this club. But and if I'm hazy on some of the details, I mean that's to be expected because it was a time to be, kind of getting messed up, so your memories, if they're hazy, it meant you had a really good time.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're only going to remember the good stuff, right?
Yeah, and if you're not remembering, it's because either you're blocking it out because of the trauma or because something better came along to take up the space where that memory had formerly been kept.
Yeah, it was boring. I mean, you remember meeting the Spice Girls, and I think that's the main thing, really.
Yeah, and I think I met them twice. I don't know.
Twice? Oh.
Yeah, I mean, they came to that place twice, and I definitely met them twice. I met them twice there, but any other time, I don't remember any other time because we were too out of
it. So Jerry's not on speed dial then?
Oh God, no.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm not going to be that jealous.
Anybody who's met me once, if they meet me twice, they know not to put me on speed dial.
Did you ever go to H.A.M at P.O.D? Well, if you did, I would love to hear from you. Please share any photos or anecdotes or stories that you have from that time. And you can reach me through social media. My username on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook is KAndersonMusic. And you can also find out more about Shirley by following her on Instagram under the username Shirley Temple Bar. Lost Spaces is not only a podcast, but a concept record as well. I've been writing songs about queer venues and the people who used to live their lives there, and will be releasing songs over the coming year. You can hear the first single, Well Grown Boys, which is also playing underneath my talking right now on all streaming platforms. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate if you subscribe, left a review on Apple Podcasts, or just told someone who you think might be interested in listening too. I am Kay Anderson, and you've been listening to Lost Spaces.